Now, not only was that more information than we needed, but it does remind us that there are parts of the body that to us seem very unnecessary.
Yeah.
And yet, for some reason, we find out they were very necessary.
The hard way.
You know?
Welcome to the Reality Is podcast, where we talk about real life and real faith. And today's topic is one that I find pretty interesting because it's a simple word. It's one word, but this word has so many definitions to so many different people. And that word is church. And so I looked up the definition of church just to see what it says. And it says it's a building used for public worship. And I thought, oh, there's so much more to this. And so why not let the pastor talk about what church is? But more than just what church is, I want to find out, why is it so important for us to gather together as a church body? So I'm going to let you talk about that.
You know, Joe, it's interesting because how many times have you heard someone say, I'm going to church?
Exactly.
Like it's a destination.
Mm-hmm.
And while there is some truth that we go to the church building, if you will, but the church or the people gathered. It is not the building. It's not concrete and stone. You can worship when God's people are gathered together, and that would be the church gathered. I think there's a couple of ways that we need to think about that. One, of course, you have the church universal.
Yes.
That would be all believers, all people have placed their faith in Jesus Christ, regardless of where they're at in the world. But you also have the local body of believers, that local body that gathers together. They come together for many different purposes, which we'll talk about later on. But it is the people.
Yes.
If we could really boil down, the church is born-again believers that have placed their faith in Jesus Christ, and they're gathered together to fulfill his purpose.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
so,
indeed.
simple definition.
That's a wonderful definition. So can you kind of explain to us why? Why do we get together as a church body? Why do we come together? Because a lot of people, and I'm sure you've heard this is too, well, I don't need to go to church because I can have church in my house, or I can just watch it online, or I could do so many different things. I don't have to go to this building where you guys call church. And it's interesting. We had a book discussion just this morning as a staff, and we were talking about why certain people don't come to church and why they've been turned off from the physical building of church. And as you've already said, no, it's not the building that you go to, though that's a part of church. That is one of the definitions, if you will. It's a building where we come together and worship. But church starts from within inside, right?
Yeah, when we talk about church and we talk about the reasons we come together, each week we gather here at Crossroads Community Church. We gather on Wednesday for our Wednesday worship, and we gather on Sunday for our Sunday worship. But the church are the people gathered there.
Exactly.
Now as we talked last week in our podcast, we believe very strongly in worship and the importance of that.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about that, the worship is for the purpose of coming together. You know, as a pastor, I love worship, church, gathering, because I get to preach.
Absolutely.
Get to share God's word, get to talk to people about what we're there for. But when we think about that and we look at what's happening, as Christians, we should desire to come together. And so a couple of things come to mind. When we're talking about church, church gathered, why we gather, I think the first thing we have to remember is obedience.
Yes.
You know,
Yes, indeed.
if we're not gathered, we're not being obedient to one of the most simple commands of Scripture. In Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25, it tells us not to forsake the gathering of ourselves together.
Exactly.
But why are we not to do that?
Because we are called to be together, because we're worshiping together as a body.
And
I'm just going to say one other thing, because I remember you have said this on multiple occasions. During COVID, we had this whole time where, we were forced to separate from each other. But what was the desire? Right. The desire was for people to actually get together. I know you said you felt it, and I'm like, I can't wait to get with people again. I want to be with people again so we could worship together.
Right. You know, one of the things that is very interesting when you talk about, do I have to come to church to worship? The answer is no.
No.
You can worship where you are. We know we read in the book of Revelation where John the Revelator was on the Isle of Patmos by himself.
Oh, yeah.
And you can't argue he wasn't in worship.
No.
But I will also tell you that he longed to be together with God's people, which kind of fits what we're talking about there. the question that we have to answer, do I have to be together with God's people? And we get into the argument of, well, I only get so many days off. I only have so much free time. And so we can go around and around with that and make a lot of different comments.
But aren't those just kind of like, those are reasons to not come together and do what we've been called to do? We even talked about it last week. We're created to worship. And when we do it together as a body, it's such a beautiful experience, something that happens and it kind of transforms you. It changes you, right?
Well, if I'm not to forsake the gathering, and he gives me 2 reasons that I don't do that. He says to stir up love and good works.
Yep.
Well, how am I going to stir up love at home by myself? And how am I going to do good works when I'm not around people to serve?
You can't give good works to anybody.
So the most basic part of my obedience is to gather with God's people, to stir up, to produce love, and then to produce good works.
Yeah.
And so I think it's one of the most basic things that I could think of. I mean, when I stop and I think about the argument that, well, can't I stay at home and do the same thing I could when I gather? Well, you think about what would happen if you told your family, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend 1 hour once a month with you. And I'm going to call that good. That's our family time. That is our time, and we're solid. I think all of us would agree that would not be sufficient for family time
at all, and nobody's going to enjoy the time together, especially when you're by yourself. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm hanging out by myself, and I'll get together with you every once in a while. You aren't. There's a joy in serving others. There really is. And I think when people understand that, it's not like, oh, I have to go and do this. And oh, the pastor told me I have to. No, there's a joy in actually serving other people.
Yeah, I think when you begin to understand the simple obedience of this very simple statement, to come together to stir up love and good works, then you really begin to get the idea, I'm not here for me.
Yeah.
Now,
exactly.
if I'm here for me, then yes, I can do that at home. I can do that doing what I want to do. But if I'm fulfilling the most basic command of I'm not forsaking the assembling of myself together so I can stir up love and good works, then at the end of the day, I'm not doing that for me.
Yeah.
And so I'm coming in for others.
Yeah. And didn't Jesus give a new command? He said, I want you to love God, but you are to love others. Right?
And which is impossible to do in my box.
If there's nobody for me to be around and love and to serve, then I'm not doing what the basic command is, right?
Right. And, we experience that. We've all been in that circumstance or that situation where we're unable to get together. I know during COVID, I missed, a couple of Sundays that I was not able to gather anywhere with anyone. Yeah. And I just be quite honest with you, nothing seemed to fit. And it was one of the most frustrating things and one of the most difficult things. I spent, not pastoring at the time, working at Screven. I spent a lot of time in rooms with just staff and pastors. But yet I was gathered with God's people. And I tell you, we just have to realize how important that is. If you ever stop to think about the simplest act of obedience, all right, the one person you speak to, the one person that you say, man, it's great to see you today, that may be the one person that needed to hear that word that day.
Exactly.
And kind of hard to say it if you're not here.
If there's nobody around. Right. And look, we both know introverted people.
Oh, yeah.
I myself am kind of introverted.
Yeah, I've always been concerned about that.
Okay, seriously. But even people who are introverts, they're scared to meet other people. They're scared to talk to other people. But when they do, and when they've now connected with somebody else, there's still a joy that happens, that they walk away from going, man, that was a good experience. Right. Even though they don't, they're scared to be around other people, but it happens. And after they do it, oh, it felt good to be. And what do you say? It was good to be in the house of the Lord today.
Yeah, so we're talking about the simplest, most basic step of obedience for a Christ follower is to gather with his people. I think along with that, it comes to the idea of community.
Yes.
where none of us are to be lone rangers, isolated, separated out.
Mhm.
It's
I know you could get into a lot of trouble by yourself.
isolation is not good for me.
No.
I have scars to prove it. When I'm sitting alone and bored, I find something to tear up.
Ooh, let me try this,
Yes.
and then boom.
Yeah. We need community. We
Yeah.
need people around us.
Absolutely.
None of us. If you've ever been in a situation where you're isolated, and then you begin to understand that, and you you begin to say, "Boy, this isolation is not all that I thought it was."
Yeah. And in some places, isn't that a punishment? Like in prison, it's like, hey, guess what? We're going to put you in solitary confinement. You are going to be all by yourself. And that's a punishment.
Right.
Like nobody goes, yes, thank you. I get to go be all by myself.
Yeah, I mean, a few moments of silence is great. Maybe a day of silence, but constant separation.
No.
When we look at 1 Corinthians and Paul's writing to the churches, and he's saying, hey, this is what church should look like.
Yeah.
And at one point he says, the church is like the body.
Yeah.
All right. So you have this body, and this body is made up of a lot of different parts.
Uh-huh.
And so he begins to say, now the church is like that.
Yeah.
And can one part say to another part, hey, you're not needed, you're not wanted, we don't need you around here.
Yeah. Every part of your body is important.
Mhm.
And I'm going to embarrass myself a little bit because I'm going to tell a story about my body. So I was, teaching. I used to be a tap teacher. And one of the students one time gave me a nose trimmer. They said, hey, here's a nose trimmer as a gift. I don't know why I got a nose trimmer. It's not like I had it coming out of my nose. But anyway, I got a nose trimmer. And I'm thinking, I don't know what to do. I've never had a nose trimmer in my life. So I went and I used the nose trimmer and I trimmed inside my nose. And then I went to the other side. I just got all the hair out of my nose. So what happened to me for the next 2 weeks? It just dripped. Like it would not stop dripping. And I'm going, I thought I had a cold. I'm going to people. I'm telling people. And so, I'm talking to a doctor. I'm like, I just won't stop dripping. I don't understand. I feel fine. I don't have a fever. And I tell him about this nose trimmer. And he's like, you shaved every bit of hair out of your nose? Yes, I shaved that. That's what the nose trimmer is for, right? And he explained to me the importance of nose hair. Something that's just so insignificant, right? Like nobody thinks about nose hair, but how important is the nose hair to my body? So no matter what the person is doing, or they go, oh, well, I'm not this part of the body, therefore I don't matter. That's a false statement.
Exactly.
It's a false statement.
Right. Now, not only was that more information than we needed, but it does remind us that there are parts of the body that to us seem very unnecessary. And yet, for some reason, we find out they were very necessary.
The hard way.
It's when my appendix ruptured and the doctor was getting ready to take me into surgery, and he said, don't worry, you don't need it. And I'm like, what do you mean I don't need it? The Lord put it there.
If it's put in my body, I'm sure I need it.
And so it's easy for us, isn't it, to take that mindset that don't worry, you're not needed.
Yep.
You don't need that. What's a little nose hair?
Yeah.
And then we find out that those things, and this is exactly why community is so important.
Thank you.
Have you ever, sometimes, and we talk about it here at Crossroads, where there's just a couple of us on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
And there's literally maybe if all of us are there at the same time and on a typical Sunday, there's 12 to 14 people on the platform throughout the whole day.
Yes.
But yet it takes 30, 40 plus to make that service work.
Just to get it started.
Exactly. And so those parts of the body that aren't seen are far more important than the parts that are seen.
So valuable.
If I'm up there and there's no one on the sound, no one hears what I have to say.
Thank you. The guy who's never seen the sound guy, it's so important because he's the one turning our microphones on.
Exactly.
And you've got a message to deliver. And if he's not back there turning the microphone on so you could deliver the message, then it's done.
But it's impossible because you're not there to be that person. It's impossible because you can't stir up love and good works.
Yeah.
One of the things that we hear often, and I know a lot of different places make the claim, and it's true in other places, but I hear often this is the friendliest place I've ever been.
Yeah, very true.
And the truth is, it's because we have a sense of community.
Yes.
And that sense of community is so important to us because we know and we recognize that we're all part of the body and we all have a different place to fit.
Yeah, there's so many different teams and ministries that are taking place and going on here. I mean, our ladies are behind the scene doing so many things that we wouldn't even think about. Like you've said this before, a guy has a certain mindset and a woman has a certain mindset. There are details that I just would never pay attention to that a woman comes beside and go, boom. And I wouldn't even notice it's done until it's not done, right?
Yeah, and I think that is why it's so important that the apostle tells us you don't know till it's not.
Yes.
And that's a great way to put it.
Yes.
You know, when's the last time you looked at your heart? Never, right?
I've never.
But I can tell you this, if it decides not to show up tomorrow, you'll be fully aware of it.
Yeah, you'll know.
And so when we stop and we consider that and we really stop to think about what community means, when you think no one cares that I'm there, when you think I don't play a part here, you play a huge part. And you may be the one, you say, well, all I do is I come in and I sit down. Well, do you talk to anybody when you get here?
Exactly.
Do you stir up love and good works? And so then you're very much part of the community and very much part of what's happening at that point.
Yes, indeed. So stirring up love and good works, having a community, very important things, but there's more to it.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I like to say is when the body gathers, it's boot camp. It is for me. It's the academy. It's boot camp. It's coming in for basic training. So often that we lose sight of that. We're putting a sign out here on our road as people will leave our parking lot. It just simply says you're now entering your mission field.
Yeah, exactly.
Your mission field's not here. This is where you get trained.
Yeah, you come, you gather the information, you learn, and then now, boom, we've been sent out. We've been sent out.
Well, the Ephesians tells us that as church leaders, our role is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. And so it's awful hard for me to equip saints that I never meet, never see, never have a chance to have a conversation with.
Very true. Very true. So it's important for them to come together so that you can teach them.
It's boot camp. Yeah. And I could just see when I was in law enforcement and went to the academy, I could just see me telling them, fish are biting, I can't make it today.
You've done that to the staff. No, yeah. I'm kidding you.
Yeah, but that's different. And it's easy for us to lose sight of how important it is for the body to gather. And when you stop and you think about that, it's to be equipped to do the work of the ministry. It is a continual process. It's a building process.
Yes, indeed.
And you're not just equipped by what you hear from the pulpit. You're equipped in the areas you serve.
Yes.
One of the things that we know to be true, the servant learns a lot more than the one being served. The more you serve people, the more you learn about God, the more you learn about His love, the more you learn about who He is in an intimate way, far more than the one being served. And so when we come together and we come to the academy, if you will, the boot camp, and we're equipped then to go out and do those things that God's called us to do. Yeah. And that's part of that body being joined together.
Yeah, and every part of the body working together as a body was like I always hear it says, well, if the eye decide to say, well, I'm not important, and if the toe and I heard this interesting fact, and I don't know because I've never lost my big toe, but I heard that it's impossible to balance without your big toe.
It's a learned act.
You've got to go. You've got to retrain yourself how to walk without something as what you call, it's just a small part of my body. It doesn't, as you say, it doesn't really matter it matters if you lose it.
And so the body's absolutely important.
So important.
And we're never going to be community. We're never going to be trained. We're never going to be in boot camp.
Yeah.
1 Peter tells us that we're to desire the milk of the word that we could grow.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
And so it's kind of comparing us to a child, a baby, not just a child, a baby. So I got 2 grandbabies.
Yeah.
So I want you to imagine bringing your baby home from the hospital, setting them in the crib, and saying, "You'll be okay by yourself."
Yeah.
You don't need to gather with the family.
No.
I don't think any of us would say that would be acceptable way to treat a baby.
Not the smartest thing at all.
and so why do we think we can separate from God's people and not gather with God's people and grow if we're not getting the milk and the meat of the word?
Yeah. And when you see him as a father in heaven that you are just coming to spend time with, and we're all gathering together as a family, as you said, when look, some of the funnest times that people have in life are family reunions. Now, granted, there's the crazy uncle at every family reunion, right? Okay, so there's the crazy uncle that's a part of the body. And you know what? You still love that uncle. And you still hang out with, and you guys still have a good time together. Same thing with the church, the family of God gathering together here to see their father, be with their father, and do it together as a family. It's a beautiful thing. And I think you're missing out on something truly special if you're saying, I don't have to gather together and do that.
No, absolutely. And so I think so often, I don't know how many times I've heard it. Don't know how many times I've kind of felt it myself, if you will. That I just think I'm tired today. I don't want to. I don't need to. Maybe, but there's never an excuse. There's never. And what happens? Sometimes we hide behind service.
Yeah.
And so we think that I've done my share, done my part, and as we look in Titus, he tells us that the older men are to mentor, disciple, be there for the younger. The older women are to be there for the younger.
Absolutely.
Now, how in the world is that going to be played out if the older and the younger are never together?
Never get together, and it can never happen. It won't happen.
And so, minus community, minus boot camp, it's impossible for us to be equipped as the saints to do the work of the ministry. And so when we start looking at that, we begin to really say, you know what? I know that I have things going on. And yet I need to be together with God's people.
Absolutely.
Now, are you a horrible person if you miss a Sunday? No.
Absolutely.
And all of us take vacation. And I get that, and that's clearly understood. But what we're talking about today and what we're looking at is the person who would profess to be a Christ follower, but have no relationship whatsoever with Christians.
Anybody else who just, exactly. You put it perfectly. Oh, I don't have any relationship with Christians, but I'm a Christian. It's interesting. Somebody was just talking to me last night about the fact that, this person claims to be a Christian, but they don't come to church. And so they've really been working, and they've invited them to our service, and they plan on coming this weekend, but they're one of those that we don't need to go to church. We don't need to hang out with other Christians because we're a Christian.
Right.
Well, does that make any sense at all? Hey, I'm a Christian and you're a Christian too. Great. We don't need to hang out with each other.
Well, I'm a person and I don't need to exclude myself from other people. And so, that argument wouldn't fit anywhere else.
No.
I remember when I was in Bible college and I had a professor one time say that the average church member with their attendance and participation in their local church would be thrown out of just about any club in existence because they wouldn't meet the basic membership requirements. They don't give, they don't attend, they don't support. You can't be a member of our club. And so, when you kind of put it in perspective of the world says, if you're going to be part of us, you're going to have to actually participate with us.
Be a part.
Right. And that's why, because they say our mission is important.
Yes.
And people participate. If I'm a member of a club, if I'm a member of an organization, then I'm a member of that because I believe in their mission.
Absolutely.
And so if I believe in their mission, then I'm going to participate.
You're going to participate. You're going to give something to it, not financially, but you're going to give a part of yourself to what you believe in and what you're doing.
And one of the things that leads us to is the idea that we're an example.
Yes.
All right. So I tell someone, I'm a born-again believer in Jesus Christ. Where do you go to church? And then the conversation stops.
I don't.
And John 13, Christ told us, he said, look, the world will know you by the love you have one for another.
Yep.
And so when my neighbors see me go out of the driveway on a Sunday, they know where I'm headed.
Yeah.
They know I'm headed to church, right? And so what do people see you do? How do they see you live? What part of your life does the body belong? I don't know how many conversations that I've had people come back and tell me that they've just been sitting at work talking about what was said at church yesterday, or talking about what
the pastor said this, or I was with so and so, and we were sharing this, and which is also, I think it brings up a very important point, is you've got to be involved locally.
Yeah.
At a church. Like what are you doing? Where are you going where you can join and connect with people who are going to change, transform your life, and you're doing the same for them. And it's back to this circle thing that we talked about last week. It's just this ongoing thing that takes place. It's very important to be involved, I think, in a local church. My daughter was challenged just this past week. She's been coming to this church yay high, grew up in the church here. And now she's away, off in college, doing her thing, wonderful. But she watches our service online, which is, it sounds great. It sounds, yay, my baby's connected. And somebody challenged her and said, sweetie, when are you going to get involved in the local church that's around you? And I said, ooh, that's a really good point.
Exactly. We have to have that. We have to have the community. We have to have one another. And we're an example.
Yes, we are.
And so we claim a relationship, but yet in that relationship there is no communication. There's no family. You stop and think about. I made mention a moment ago. What if you gathered with your family no more than you gathered with the church?
Yeah, exactly.
And where would that be, and what would that look like? And so it's. I think it's important that we understand how important that example is, and the impact that we can have on others. There are people all around us looking for something to belong to.
Yes, indeed.
If you don't believe that, go to any gym, go to any place that people gather, and they're looking for a place to belong, and they're looking for a place to fit in.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is if you go to the gym, at least no gym I've been in, you don't walk in and they say, "Oh, you don't look right to be here."
Not at all.
You don't walk in and they don't say, "Oh, you don't fit our ideal client."
Yeah.
What they do is they say, "Welcome. Let us introduce you to someone that will help you improve where you're at in life."
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so you go and you begin to do the hard work that it takes.
And how much more should we be doing that as a church for our people?
Exactly.
I mean, we were just talking in our book study this morning. There are churches that will literally turn people away because they don't look like they're supposed to look coming to church. And that's one of the saddest things that I was reading in that book. And I look on and I go, wow. The reason people don't come to church, the building, in some cases is because they've been scarred by the church.
Exactly.
Like we keep talking about how important it is to gather together. We want to see you gather together. And some people out there are going, yeah, I tried that. And you know what happened? I was turned away.
Exactly. I don't know how many conversations I've had with people over the years. And so you're talking to them about church and you're inviting them to church, and you say, and they go, "Oh, well, where do you go?" And you name your church, and they look at you and they go, "Does so-and-so go there?" Well, you think you got them, right?
Yes.
Yeah, man, absolutely. They go there and they go, "There's no way."
Yep.
And we got to remember that. We got to remember that it's how we treat people in and out.
Absolutely.
And I think that becomes part of that example.
Yeah.
As you said, Christ said, he was approached and they said, "Okay, what's the greatest commandment?" Well, they felt they had him in a box, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, it's simple. Love God." And he goes, "And by the way, the other, which is equal, is love others."
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, it is impossible for me to love others if I'm not gathered with others.
Exactly.
And I want to be careful because I don't want people to walk away from this conversation with the idea, okay, every time the door is open, I have to be there.
Yeah,
I have to be the one that unlocks the door and turn the lights on.
Yeah. Not at all.
Or I'm not faithful. But what we are saying is if church is an afterthought,
Mhm.
gathering.
Yeah.
See, I'm naming it the
Yeah,
building.
you called it. You just said church.
If
Yeah.
if gathering with God's people is the afterthought
Mhm.
that I do because I have nothing else to do today, then
Mm.
what kind of example am I giving?
Mm.
One of the sad things, and it's just the truth as we look at what's taking place in our own society. We're watching church attendance continue to drop,
Yeah.
and
Yes,
as
indeed.
church attendance continues to drop, the question we have to ask is: was church ever of value and importance in the home
Yeah.
that they were in?
Yeah. Exactly.
And so, I think we need to remember that,
Mhm.
and we need to understand there is an example in everything we do.
Yeah.
And so I think it's so
And
important.
that example starts with you.
Exactly.
You're the one setting the example. Like you said, hey, you're leaving your house. Your neighbors know what you're. And again, it's not like you've gone out and said, I'm a pastor. Look at me. I'm waving my pastor flag and now I'm heading to church. No. How did they find out you were a pastor? You entered their door and just introduced yourself. Hey, welcome to the neighborhood. I'm new in the neighborhood. It's so excited to see you. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a. But the first initial contact was just you loving on your neighbors.
And I think that's important. It's an example. And the final thing I'd say is as we think about this is it's our identity.
Yes. Yes,
It's
it is.
here at Crossroads. We believe very strongly in is that we make disciples who make a difference.
Yes, indeed.
So that's you can't come on our campus without seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
Very few Sundays can you leave here without hearing that.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
All right. And so we make disciples who make a difference. But if we're not gathered, we're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And
You can't make a disciple or make a difference.
Exactly. And so how am I going to make a difference if I'm not gathering with God's people to stir up love and good works?
Yeah.
How am I going to gather or make a difference if I'm not the example
Mm-hmm.
that I need to be? So all of this begins to come together. If I don't go to boot camp,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm not going to learn how to be a disciple.
There you go.
That makes a difference. When I was in the academy before law enforcement and going through rookie school and through the academy, I went in to the academy thinking I knew a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up a country boy. I know that surprises you.
I'm very shocked at
all
that.
right. So I grew up a country boy, and I think I know how to shoot.
Yeah.
I mean, and so they tell us that they're going to teach us to shoot firearms.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my thought is I'm going to teach you how to shoot firearms, right? Well, guess what? First day of class, I found out I knew nothing about shooting a firearm.
Yeah.
I knew enough to be dangerous,
Exactly.
but I didn't know what I thought I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we gather.
Or the proper way to do it,
Exactly.
to be most effective in what you were trying to do with the firearm.
Right. And so when we gather with God's people, it's boot camp, man.
Yeah.
It's where we come together. And that's how we build our identity. That's how we
Absolutely.
make disciples that make a difference. And so we realize that Christ told us that my Father is glorified when you bear much fruit.
Yep.
And that fruit, while that fruit isn't based only in gathering with God's people, that fruit is not going to produce if you're not gathering with God's people.
Exactly. So I love that. I love that. Were you going to share anything else, or that's your wrap up?
Right.
Okay. So the reality is, as we break it down, church isn't just a building. Church is actually who we are. The church are the people coming together in the building, and the importance of gathering together with the points that you just shared are just amazing. And I really pray that you guys would, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, if you would just take that to heart, the importance of why we gather together. And this isn't us saying, hey, if you're not gathering together, you need to come to our church. This is not a plea to come to our church by any means. It's just the importance of what we talked about earlier, the nose hair, how important you are. Don't let anybody let you think, oh, well, I'm not good enough to go there. I can't go there because, or I've been hurt and therefore I'm not going to go there. Yeah, we've all been hurt. Yeah, you know what? We've been hurt in our own family, right? I've had family hurt. I've had church hurt, but I still get together with my family. I'm still going to get together with my church family, and we're going to serve the Lord together. So Thank you so much for sharing all those points with us. Thank you guys for listening to the Reality Is podcast, where we talk about real life and real faith. And we look forward to next week, where we'll tackle another topic and see, what our pastor has to say about it, what I feel about it. And then if you guys want to comment, let us know about it as well. So God bless you guys. You have a wonderful week.
Have a great week. Don't forget, love God and love others as you go through this week.
Amen.